So this is Nolcha Fox, Barbara Lender, and Ken Tomorrow, and we're going to talk about the fine art of collaboration. So I wanted to start off asking both of you, why do you write? So writing has been part of me for forever. It's been my bones, my blood, my flesh. I tell people I started writing with poop on the wall, and that's absolutely true. I don't know what I would do if I wasn't writing.
I kind of fell into it accidentally, or sort of accidentally. I wrote a book many, many years ago. It was short stories. It was really, really bad, published by one of those vanity publishers. So they didn't really do a lot of editing. It was bad. I let it go. And a couple of years after, a friend of mine sent me a message saying he thought my style of writing reminded him of Charles Bukowski, which I'd never heard of. And I picked up a couple of his books and just kind of fell in love with. He's got a really simple style, real easy to read, and it just kind of worked for me. And really, the other bigger reason that I've discovered is it's a good therapy. I deal with depression, so it's a good, cheap, or free therapy.
I was around age 8 and I started writing stories with no endings and poems with no form in these little memo pads that you still buy today, the little flip pads. And I did it mainly because my parents were proud of me, and they would, have me read my literary works to dinner guests. And because I was from such a large family, it gave me a little bit of prestige over my brothers and sisters. So I felt special. And also, I just wanted to write for some reason. I have ideas of why, but I was just compelled to write, even though I didn't know what I was doing, and I was very frustrated with that. Then in college, I had good professors who encouraged me, and often I could write several poems instead of a paper for an assignment, which was fun.
How long have you been publishing your poetry? So I started in 2021. And actually, poetry was not my go-to. As a matter of fact, I was horrible at poetry, horrible. My mother actually sent me some poems that she had saved when I was, I don't know, in my 20s. I actually tossed them because they were so bad. I love to write short stories. However, I started getting migraines and they were so bad that I had to stop writing. So once I started to learn how to control the migraines, my brain was so soggy from pain and from medication that I realized I could not go back to short stories. And a friend of mine suggested I tried poetry, and I was absolutely shocked when my pieces were published. So that was the beginning of the end.
I'm like the total opposite of you. I cannot write short stories to save my life. And poetry, it seemed to work for me just because that's how my brain works, little short bursts. So I think back in 2017 was when I started uh, throwing out submissions to magazines, and I got, I don't know, probably 15 or 20 rejections. At that point, I was like, what am I doing? And then I got my first acceptance on Christmas Eve, 2017. I thought that was like the best Christmas present I've ever gotten.
Well, I published first in The Woods Runner, which was the college literary magazine. And so I had stories and poems published in that, and it was at Lake Superior State College, which is now a university. But then I got really caught up in school and just got a number of rejections, and I just started working more on my degree work. And but in 2017, after I retired and my mom had passed away, I started writing more, and I opened my WordPress blog at that time. And so I thought I would try writing poetry, and then I thought, well, maybe I'll try submitting some to Silver Birch Press, Spill Words, Amethyst Review, and others. And I got some acceptances, so I just started working on other poetry, like poetry about my mother and me, which became my book, Three Penny Memories. a poetic memoir, which was published in 2022. And a poem from that was nominated for a pushcart. So I feel like I'm maybe on the right track.
Ken, you and I started collaborating in February of this year. Our collaborations have been published in Lothlorien Poetry Journal, Masticadoras USA. Thank you, Barbara. Medusa's Kitchen, Muddium, and Roy. I can't even say this. So Roy. And York Radio Productions has accepted 2 of our collaborations for a podcast. So as I recall, I think we first met on Twitter in Arden's group. And now we're both members of Robert Allen's Thursday Night Poetry group. So I thought it would be fun for us to collaborate because we both have a very similar sense of dark humor. And I want to know what your initial reaction was when I suggested collaborating.
I was actually excited. I had seen that you had done some collaborations with some other people, and like I said, I kind of felt like, oh, I wouldn't mind doing that. Um, I didn't reach out only because I thought maybe you were too busy, or there's always that chance that somebody will say no. And then you reached out to me shortly after that. And you remember more than I do. I don't remember being in a group with Arden on Twitter. I recognize his name. Uh,
Well, it was a couple of years ago. So
I can't remember what I did a half hour ago. So
Barbara, you and I developed a friendship because the Techno Gremlins were basically eating my attachments for my submission to you. And that was actually, the Gremlins were the subject of our first collaboration. And our collaborations have been published in Contemplate, Hotel Masticadoras, Masticadoras USA, Minimag, Muddium, and Roy. And 2 collaborations will be published by Thrush Press. I suggested that we collaborate because we really are simpatico with a similar sense of humor. So what was your initial reaction when I suggested collaborating?
I felt like you and I were cut from the same cookie cutter. And when you sent the first collaboration, I felt like I knew how to fit in with the tone and theme of what you were writing. So it seems to go pretty well. I find it fun to play with the words and imagery. Our humor is similar, and we're both storytellers. So our collaborations are working out really well with interesting turns and different levels of meaning.
Well, I really appreciate both of you for being my willing victims. I have had previous experience collaborating with other artists and flash fiction writers, and 2 of my published books are collaborations. So I love the element of surprise, and I never know what's coming at me.
you hit it right there. You don't, like, I literally do not know what's coming until I see your email. Um, so there's always this little bit of excitement. It's I what I really liked about it is, and I'm sure every writer out there, you stumble on something or you have a couple of good lines that come out and you don't know what you want to do with them. And I don't like throwing away words. So I'll let them sit and, throw that to you and say, hey, what can you do with this? So it's a good way to keep the words going.
Yeah, I like the flexibility. I should say spontaneity too. There's a conversational component sometimes where I feel like the 2 speakers are actually talking back and forth. But at times we seem to be one voice, which is interesting. And our verses inform each other and advance a concept or a plot, which is totally unplanned when we start. And we're in a kind of creative dance, which I appreciate. After I reply with a verse, I have no idea what you're going to say or how you will respond. But your new stanza is always really clever. And then I get inspired to reply. And we both seem to know when the poem is finished. You're like, I think it's done now. Okay, on to the next one. And another thing is, a lot of times I just hang on to my poems too long, and I don't really take enough risks trying to publish with all the variety that you guys have. I don't think I've tried that enough, and so having working with Nolcha, I feel like we let go of the poetry. You know, let it go, see what happens, and that's pretty good. So you shouldn't hoard words, and you should just throw them out there.
So Ken, our collaboration started with lobbing poetry to each other that we didn't know whether we wanted to keep or kill. So these poems are really granted a reprieve because we worked together. How would you say our collaborations have changed over time?
I don't know if they've changed. I think they've grown. And I think we've become really good with playing off of each other and doing it quickly. I mean, I'm always amazed at how quickly you can come up with something. I throw something out there, and literally 15 minutes later, you've got another stanza and something for me to work with. They've gotten better, I'll say that.
I don't know. I can relate to what Ken said. I feel like we're developing one voice more and more and a mutual understanding. Also, I think that what looks like play is actually thoughtful commentary on aging, loss, grief, and other topics of the human condition. I think we think our poems have dark humor, but it's surprising when they're published by someone who thinks it's serious. So, I mean, we seem to be developing a pretty rich repertoire of poems on themes that are relevant to us at our age in life. And so I noticed that our collaborations are deepening.
So now I'd like to talk about how we write to each other's stanzas. So what I like to do is to pick a phrase or a line or two from something that you wrote as a launching pad for my response stanza.
I feel like it's just kind of wherever my head is at the time. Again, I have no idea what's coming. So I kind of look at that, and sometimes I try to play off one or two lines and go with that theme. Sometimes I get off track maybe and go with some completely different thing. It is that what Barb was saying, the spontaneity of something just going completely crazy, and we seem to be pretty good at either going way more off the tracks or bringing each other back.
Sometimes I want to explore an idea with you, so I'll send you a collaboration to start with, and sometimes I have a short poem that might stand alone, but I think this might be a good jumping off point for a collaboration, and maybe it wants that or wants something more, and we'll try it out. So those are the two main reasons why I might send you one.
I like to collaborate because collaborations remind me why I enjoy writing. It really helps me keep my poetry fresh. It helps me really enjoy writing. So how has collaborations changed the way you write?
I don't know. I feel like my writing and living with the depression, a lot of my themes and my style remains the same. So collaborating was a really good way to, kind of try something different.
I notice in conversations that sometimes my humor plays off what other people have just said or something that's going on, and that's sort of what happens with you, which is really fun for me. And I like using humor to surprise people. And in our collaborations, we do have twists and turns and surprises, and plays on words or plays with language that I really enjoy doing. And I just finished writing that book, which was a lot of grief work, and so the collaborating has shifted me to another aspect of myself. So just having fun, not worrying about grief and loss, but in a serious way, but maybe it's just in a fun punster way now.
I'd like to talk about what some of the challenges are. collaborating?
I guess I would say the biggest challenge is, that surprise, like you don't know what's coming from the other person. Um, there's always that little bit of, can I play off of this? Um, I agree with you. Like I feel like we have that same darkish sense of humor and a weird way of looking at the world. And I think I could probably do collaborations with some other people in the Thursday night group, but it would be harder for me and it would take a whole lot more thought and brain power. Um, so it's not impossible. The biggest challenge I think is just, am I going to be able to bring something else to this work in progress?
Part of it is like it is exciting when you think you're going to get another verse, or when you open up the email and there's a collaboration and you look at it and you go, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do this. So I have to wait at least 10 minutes, and so sometimes I get an angle right away, and sometimes it doesn't come right away. And then sometimes when I get something, sometimes I wonder if we're going off in two different directions completely, or if I understood your motive at the first stanza or whatever. And I'm wondering if our poem isn't diverging into, chaos. So that's a kind of challenge where each of us has to think about how to bring the poem back to a central, agreed upon theme, which is really easy to get off track, in which case maybe it's a longer poem because we have to
How do you
rescue it.
feel when you get off track? Like I kind of enjoy that. Like you
Yeah,
don't know what's
yeah.
coming and this person has a certain theme in mind. And I've had several times, a lot of times where I'm at work and I'm just like really grumpy from something and I see a quick email and I know Nolch is going for this certain thing, but for some reason my brain just goes somewhere else and it
Right.
most of the time it works.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a lot of volleyball with it, we're passing the ball back and forth, and then where
Yeah.
maybe the ball will go out of bounds, and someone has to go run and catch the ball, save the game. Yeah, it's all fun, but and part of my reactions of stress might be that I think there has to be one answer, and it really doesn't.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to me. Like I feel like again, if you're going for this one theme and it goes off track, sometimes you still get a really good poem or a better poem than when you
Yeah.
originally started.
But anyway, it usually works out fine. I don't know if there's one poem that we've written that I don't like. In fact, we've written so many, I'm not sure I remember any of them.
Well, I really hope that things do go off track, actually.
That's a good way to look at it. Right.
Say I typically may start with something, but I don't expect it to end there,
Right, right. Yeah.
How many poems have we gotten so far? Like 50?
at least.
Yeah. And that's what amazed me too. We just started throwing things back and forth, and I think we came up with enough for a chapbook in
Yeah.
2 weeks.
We did, yeah. As a matter of fact, it's going to be published in 2024.
Yeah.
I would say that my biggest challenge is where to submit these things. I think it's hard to find literary magazines that are willing to do it.
But if they were trying to be innovative at all, I think they would want them.
And Barbara, I know something that we've run into that's been a problem is submitting to magazines with young MFAs.
Yeah.
Because they look at these collaborations and go, no, I didn't do this in college. We are not going to publish this.
And that would
Yeah.
drive me crazy because
Right.
obviously these people are going from some sort of specific format. And as we well know, poetry has no format whatsoever and it goes wherever. And I don't know why people are afraid of that.
Right, right. Yeah. I sometimes wonder if they don't have a lot of formulas they're taught of how to write like a surreal poem, or gimmicks and techniques that they're too young to know that there's other ways of doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
And one thing I really appreciate about working with both of you is that I don't feel that any of us are bound by certain expectations, or we don't really have boundaries.
I'll be the first to tell you, I do not follow rules well at all. When submitting to, I mean, I follow certain rules when submitting to magazines, but I don't know, we want this, or this is how you should submit it, and this is the format. And like I said, poetry is not one of those things that has a format. So people
Right.
need to be willing to take some chances. Like, I feel like doing videos like this, on some level, may reach a bigger audience because you can share it on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, all these other uh, avenues. But you submit to a magazine, you get accepted, and then they put it in an anthology, and nobody buys the book.
Hmm.
You give people a choice between buying a book of poetry and going out and having a couple of beers. They're going to pick beer every time. It seems like the only people who read poetry or buy poetry are other poets.
And sometimes I think whether we're accepted in a place or not is whether they're willing to do the format that we have, right and left aligned, right aligned. I feel so we're adapting to just finding ways of bringing the verses closer together,
Right.
so it'll be less work for them.
What's funny about that is you say that sometimes that maybe they don't want to accept the format that you have it in. And I don't understand that, because it is in your title. You are an editor. That's what
Yeah.
you do. But
Right, I know.
sometimes I think they just want to click and paste and play and be on their way.
Yeah, they like on WordPress, I learned how to, set up a collaborative poem. When you guys, submitted, I've never had a problem with WordPress.
Maybe you should put out a tutorial for some editors
Yeah,
so
maybe
they, like,
yeah,
I
really.
mean, I could go off on all kinds of tangents, when you're
Yeah,
talking about magazines that pay and don't pay. And I feel like, obviously the ones who pay figured it out. So why don't the ones who don't pay get with the ones who do pay? And it's like only us poets want to collaborate with each other. It's like
yeah,
sometimes, they just don't want to put in the work. And I hear a lot of times editors will say, oh, this is just a side gig. This is a little part-time thing for me. And I think you both know that's total crap. There is no
right.
part-time to this whatsoever. It takes a lot of work. And
It it does.